Okay, I have a confession to make. I am a recovering bad learner. Yes, it's true. It's true. All throughout school, I was an absolutely dreadful student. I wouldn't pay attention in class. I wouldn't take notes. I would cram for tests the night before to the point where I barely remembered any of the information afterwards. I was a bad student. And I always thought it was just me, right? That's just who I was. That, I was just handled a bad hand when it comes to learning in my brain. I thought I was just bad at learning. That was until I got to college. It's about really the end of my college career. You see, I had changed my major twice. I had a wife. I had a new baby on the way. We had a new house. I was changing, getting started in my career. And so I realized I'm like, ugh, if I'm going to really do this new level of college that was for my career, I really needed to apply myself in a specific way. And I couldn't use the learning habits that I had before, but I had to realize that it wasn't just a bad learner. Maybe I was just bad at learning. I was using bad learning techniques. So I had to change my relationship to learning. I needed to learn how to learn better. So maybe you're like me. Maybe you just kind of struggle with learning. Maybe you feel like other people are just smarter than you, they're better than you. Maybe that they've been handed a much better card, you've been handed a raw deal, and you just have to deal with it. Well, the truth is, the good news is that, well, as a recovering bad learner, you can change your habits. You can go from tolerating how to learn to truly loving how to learn. You can go from surviving to thriving. Because here's the thing, learning, it's a lifelong process, right? It's something that when we were born, we're little sponges that are soaking up everything. We're constantly learning. But then we go through our entire lives until death learning. I'm not just talking about like the K through 12 and college, the 12 to 20 years worth of learning that we have to do for schooling. I'm talking about the daily process of learning something new. This can be learning about your friends and family. It can be training for work. It can be picking up a hobby. Maybe something interests you. Maybe it's a continuing learning process that you're saying, hey, I want to learn something new as a lifestyle thing, or maybe just it's something you're interested in. Whatever it is, learning never stops. So we need to probably learn how to learn better. But here's the cool thing, when you learn better, here's some of the benefits you get. You get to stay sharper. Learning new skills, it keeps you crisp, keeps you sharp, helps you. There's these things called myelin in your brains. It's kind of the white matter that's responsible for speed and strength and stuff like that within your brain. When you learn, it helps kind of flex those muscles, massage those muscles. You also get better work. So whenever you learn better, research shows that you're going to produce better work, and that's awesome. But you don't just produce better work; you have a better mental health, right? So it gets your neuroplasticity, it gives you confidence, it helps you with your purpose. All these things, mental health increases. In fact, learning better sometimes increases the stress fighting hormones in your brain and decreases the stress producing chemicals, which is kind of just a fun thing. But also, here's the thing: there is more mula dinero, there is more money whenever you learn. Research shows that a study found that professionals participating in education reimbursement programs achieve 43% higher income. So when you learn more, you do make more. Life is not all about money, but it does help whenever you can get a little bit more for your family for the purpose that God has given you. So learning does a lot of things, but one of the biggest things is it builds confidence and it helps you live out your purpose, right? God's called you to love him, to love others. The way that you do that is you continue to learn and look more like him. So here are some tried and true ways from either myself, from science, or way smarter people than me on how to learn better. Sound good? Cool, let's get into it. So the first thing we're going to do whenever we're learning how to learn is we're going to read things purposefully. We're going to read things purposefully. Okay, So we need to establish first and foremost, whenever we start to read something, whether it be a textbook, whether it be a book for leisure, something for work, an article, whatever it is, we need to establish the purpose of our reading. Why are we reading this? The word that you guys hear me say all the time, why? Now, for me, I'm usually reading several books at once, whether it be for leisure or for work or just reading the scriptures, right? That's something that I love to do and also do it for my job. So each one of these books that I read has a different application, a different purpose for why I'm reading. I'm going to give you a couple examples. So right now I'm reading 3 books. All right, so I'm reading a book called Think Ahead by Craig Groeschel. I'm reading a book called Live Your Best Life. And I'm reading a book called Pray Like Monks, Live Like Fools. So the Think Ahead book is a book all about pre-deciding your decisions, doing things ahead of time, whether it be your mindset, why you do what you do, or how you're going to do it, so that you can optimize, kind of your work function, and kind of bleeds over into your personal life too. Live your best life. These are just fun little science-based hacks that you can live. So whether it be sleep habits, eating habits, exercise habits, all the way down to digestive stuff, what goes in you, what goes out of you, in order to just optimize your daily life. And then I'm reading the Pray Like Monks book. It's just all about having an authentic prayer rhythm with God. Now, these books, they really don't have a whole lot to do with each other, right? But each one of these has a specific purpose that I'm reading it. Each one of them, I know why I'm reading it. I know what the application will be for those. So before reading these books, I'll literally do this process before I open up a chapter, right? I will think, why am I reading this? What am I wanting to get from this chapter, this section, whatever? Okay, so before we do that, we need to establish why. That's going to help you go into it. And then you can kind of go through, you can look at the different chapter summaries or the headings or whatever. You can kind of help that influence that ahead of time. So if I'm reading the Think Ahead chapter that talks about pre-deciding decisions that you make for organizational communication or for your own personal habits and stuff like that, there's sometimes chapter headings that the author will put in there. There's summaries ahead of time. I'll look at those and say, okay, this is going to help me with this. So thinking ahead with that. But as I'm reading, right, I'm going to read more purposefully. So what I'm going to do is I love highlighting. Now, highlighting can sometimes be good, sometimes can be bad, because sometimes we just highlight a bunch of stuff and say, okay, perfect. The highlighter is linked to my brain, and I've just now retained all that information. It just doesn't work that way, unfortunately. So what I'll do is I'll highlight specific things, either things that resonated really powerfully with me, things that I didn't necessarily know, things that I love, but they said it in a way better way than I possibly could. But then here's what I'll do. I'll make notes next to that. They can be super silly notes of things that just made me think of. That's going to connect those things. It's something we're going to talk about later, is making those connections to things. But also, it's me reframing what they're saying in a different way, right? And then here's what I do. When I get done with that chapter, I go immediately and I reread my highlights and my notes, right? So that's going to be me not just going through it once. I'm going to be basically going through it twice and definitely focusing on things that, really retained well for me. Okay. Now, when we have that memory retention, here's the last bit that I do. Okay. So ahead of time, I'm going to ask the question, what am I getting from this? What am I seeking? What's the application for this? Then as I read, I'm going to make those notes and I'm going to reread through those. The third thing is I'm going to play the expert. So this is a beautiful thing. Brain science kind of helps you know that when you become the expert in the thing that you just talked about or what thing you just read, and then you talk about it with somebody else, you build confidence, but you also build memory retention, because when you have the ability to explain something, it shows you actually comprehend it. So here's a couple of practical things you can do in order to retain that information. Tell it to a friend, teach it to a friend, family member. My wife, unfortunately, God love her, she has to deal with me telling her all the things that I just learned about a book or something that I watched. I'm teaching it then to my wife, to my kids, to the coaches, the leaders that I get to lead. Please pray for all the people that are there in my life, because they have to deal with that stuff too much. You can start a podcast. It's a lot easier than you think to get started. Maintaining it is a whole different story. But You can start a podcast. You can be that person who's teaching other people how to do those things. You can start a blog. You can start a YouTube channel. Whatever it is, you're going to be the expert and you're going to teach somebody how to do that, right? One last hot tip on reading. Here's something I was reading a book a while ago. It was called, Mozart's Brain and the Fighter Pilot. Very fascinating book, all about brain science and stuff like that. So in that book, they talked about the idea of listening to non-lyrical, right, non-vocal, just instrumental music. This is Mozart. This is Beethoven. But also, it's not just classical music. You can do this with there's Spotify. One of my favorite Spotify playlists. It's called Brain Food. It's just non-lyrical, non-vocal words based stuff. Doesn't have any of that in there. It's just sounds. So what that's going to do is going to stimulate. It's going to massage the part of your brain that's going to be comprehending the things, because the other part of your brain is going to be utilized in digesting, getting the information in. So you're not just going to listen to that, though. You're going to go on a walk. You're going to walk as you do that. And people who work with me, they oftentimes see me reading and walking at the same time. I encourage you, please choose a path that you don't have to think about walking. Choose a circle. Choose something that's going to be, an easy thing. You're not going to bump into anything. Just go walking back and forth in your room, whatever it is. When you do that, you're stimulating the two different hemispheres in your brain, and you're actually going to be making those synaptic connections. You're going to be helping the Lego pieces that is your brain make connections easier whenever you do those things. It's like a big brain workout. It's awesome. Okay, so the first thing we're doing is read things purposefully. Okay, we're going to do things on purpose. Then we're going to listen in intentionally. Okay, we're going to listen in intentionally. So much of what we learn right now is through listening, right? You are listening to this right now, right? You are listening to videos. You're listening to lectures. You're listening to people as they talk to you. Unfortunately, we as people are not very good listeners. Now, if you want a whole podcast about better listening strategies, you can actually listen to our conversation we had a few months ago on giving your full attention. That's a shameless plug for our own thing, but you can definitely listen to that. We got great stuff about giving your full attention. Now, one strategy that we can do to better listen to somebody is actually summarizing what we just heard. Now, conversationally, here's how this could apply. Someone's talking to me about something, and I can say, now, what I hear you saying is this, or help me understand what you're saying is this, or okay, what I'm hearing is this. Now, this is doing two things. One, you're actually making an emotional connection with that person. They're feeling valued and heard as you're reiterating what they say, but you're kind of saying it in a different way, your own way, to be able to comprehend it, okay? So you're doing two things. You're making a connection with them, but you're also making a connection in your brain, right? You're listening intentionally. But here's what you're doing whenever you do it through a podcast, through an article, through a video, through a lecture, whatever it is, through an audiobook. You are making those connections for yourself. When you summarize what you just heard, you can make a stronger connection for yourself. You're using your own words to be able to understand what that person, what that teacher is saying. Now, here's the thing. When you do this, you have to summarize by asking the question, what's the main point? Most teachers, good or bad, have a main point. Sometimes they just ramble. That is what it is. But they have a main point. They have something that they're trying to get you to understand. Whether they know it or not, they are trying to get you to understand something. So as you listen to something, ask the question, okay, what are they trying to say? What's the main point? What's the takeaway from this? When you do that, then you can summarize it, right? You can summarize, okay, this is what they're trying to say. Here's the kind of the things that they're trying to get at. And then you can make points within there. So if they have an hour-long lecture, listen to it and say, okay, what are they trying to say? They're trying to say this. Okay, so then within there you can say, oh, here's their key points. Here's their main takeaways that they're trying to get from this. Boom. Then you can retain that information a heck of a lot better. Now, I want you to also be conscientious as you're listening to be a diligent note taker. Now, the big thing you don't want to do when you're taking notes is you don't want to just make quotes verbatim, right? That can be good, but I want you to immediately summarize that, in your own words, in your own way of thinking. Yet again, you're going to make those connections within your own brain about what that looks like. Now, this is going to be a very difficult thing to do at first. It's something you need to get better at practicing as you do. But when you do, it's going to be way easier for you to make those connections and retain what someone is saying because you have put it in your own words. You're not just parroting it back to what they said. One last word on listening, okay, and note taking kind of thing. Science-based research says that memory retention works best without technology. I'm sorry. Making a notes on our laptop or on our phone, those things just don't last as well. First and foremost, because it leads to more distraction, right? You got the internet. So if you have like a flyaway idea, you're going to go Google it, and that's going to take you down a whole rabbit hole. But also you have your notifications, right? You're doing something, and it comes up, ding, you follow that rabbit hole. That's why I always encourage people, if you're going to read the Bible, which you should read the Bible, don't do it on your phone, please, because a notification is going to come up. Your buddy's going to ask, what time you're going to be hanging out later. You're going to see a notification for a snap or, something on your story or a YouTube notification, whatever it is, you're going to follow that. Don't get distracted. But also, when you do notes by hand, there is a connection between your hand and your brain, and you have a higher likelihood of retaining that. Okay? So the first thing we're going to do, right? We're going to read purposefully. We're going to read it purposely, but then we're going to listen in intentionally, right? Third thing we're going to do is we're going to break away frequently, right? We're going to read it purposefully. We're going to listen in intentionally, and we're going to break away frequently. Now, sometimes we think that the best way to learn, right, is, man, we're just going to sit down. We're going to muscle down. We're going to get all of our caffeine. We're going to get all of our snacks. We're going to lock ourselves in our room, close away all the distractions, just focus, right? And sometimes that can be really good. We're actually talk about a method that works with that. But most times that's not the best way to be productive, right? The best way to be productive is giving your brain strategic breaks. Because your prefrontal cortex, this beautiful part of your brain, love it, that helps all things productivity, all things habit building, all things discipline. We've talked about the prefrontal cortex with willpower and motivation. You're giving that a break by not having information overload. My gosh, we get so much stuff in a day, right? And sometimes it can feel like there's just so much stuff. Our brain's about to explode from so much information. So when you give it a little bit of a break, you just you take care of your prefrontal cortex, you're going to last way longer. So here's a couple of good methods to give yourself that little brain break. First and foremost, you're going to do some prayer and meditation, right? Man, we do not spend enough time in silence, solitude, just being with the Lord, but also just focusing our minds, okay? So I challenge you, 1 minute, 2 minutes, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, whatever it is, just a little bit of prayer and meditation, asking the Lord to give you wisdom, guidance, direction, but also you just gotta have a little bit of silence. You'll be doing deep breathing exercise while you do this. I love the box breathing. So what you're gonna do is you're gonna plant your feet on the ground. You're gonna sit up straight and let that diaphragm kind of speak and breathe there, and you're gonna breathe from your belly, not from your chest, right? You guys do this in sections of 4. Okay, so you're gonna breathe in, 1, 2, 3, 4. Hold, 1, 2, 3, 4. Out, 1, 2, 3, 4. You do that box breathing. It centers your breathing. It's going to get you focused in that way. It's going to get more oxygen to your blood, more blood to your brain, right? You see how all that works, and it's going to get you focused, right? It's a beautiful thing. So prayer, meditation, breathing is key. Second thing, take a walk. Go do an exercise break. Man, there is incredible benefit, even like a 10-minute walk that can just help your brain refocus, because physical exercise is something that can actually help in our cognitive abilities. So it can be, you know what, I'm gonna in the middle of this study session, I'm gonna go to the gym real quick. I'm gonna go on a walk. I'm gonna do some push-ups. I'm gonna do some squats. Whatever it is, I'm going to do something that's physically going to get me changing my orientation. Mark Batterson, I love his quote. He says a change of pace plus a change of place equals a change of perspective. Sometimes getting away, getting out, taking that break is going to be super good for you. Next thing, hot bath, man. Too hot, hot bath. Love it. That stuff is really good for that. Personally, I don't like hot baths, but I do like hot showers. Now, they do kind of say that soaking in a bath can reduce stress, anger, depression. even more than just a shower. But man, getting that hot thing, that's that hot water is the necessity to that. Plus, I always talk about the prefrontal cortex. When you aren't focusing on something, it's kind of like a computer. Now, I don't understand completely how computers work, but I do know there's one part that's working and one part that's working behind the scenes. Your brain is that way. Your prefrontal cortex, that's the one working in the front. The one working in the background is the rest of your brain, right? When you free up your prefrontal cortex, you're not having to worry about anything. Okay, that main section is shut down. The rest of your brain is able to start making those connections and doing those things. That's why we have those revelations in the shower. Now, here's just a little between me and you. I think that the Holy Spirit works in our brain, in the 8-pound medicine ball that is our brain. And so it's going to be making those connections behind the scenes. And all we have to do is slow down, stop, let him do his thing. All right. So taking a hot shower, taking a hot bath, taking something where you're getting your brain off of it. Right. Last thing for a productivity thing is you're going to practice time blocking. So time blocking it's a fascinating thing. It's the idea of you taking little moments of hyper productivity on a task. This can be 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 20 minutes, 2 hours, whatever it is, you're blocking apart that time. This is a productivity hack that a lot of writers will use. They'll say, okay, I'm going to write for 2 hours, or between 9 o'clock and 10 o'clock, I'm going to write 1,000 words. But it can also be a really quick hack for cleaning productivity, right? You can say something like, okay, my garage is a mess right now. I'm going to spend 10 minutes on this section, just this one section, right? Because that's going to boost your confidence, going to get you a mindset that you've done something, but you're not going to be spending hours exhausting on it. What about a paper? You're writing a paper. Okay, spend 10 minutes just on that paper. You want to read an article. Say, I'm going to devote 20 minutes to reading this article. Little productivity things, and then you're going to switch it up. You're going to task switch. That's another thing. So it's impossible to multitask. Your brain just can't do it. Now, science proves that women are actually a little bit better at task switching than men. That's just a fun little fact for you. But when we task switch, we're going to focus heavily on this thing, then we're going to leave it. We're going to forget about it for a second, and we're going to go to another thing, preferably something that's in a different realm. So for instance, we're going to study really hard on this subject. Then we're going to go clean something. Then we're going to come back and we're going to study something. Then we're going to go exercise. You're going to task switch in things. Hey, I'm going to have this meeting where it's very relational. Then I'm going to go to a planning meeting. Now, so we can talk about the transitions you got to make in between there. But the idea, it's task switching frees up space in your mind. That way your brain can make those connections. Make sense? Beautiful. Okay, so first thing we're doing, read it purposefully, right? Then we're going to live it, listen to it intentionally. Then we're going to break away frequently. The last thing we're going to do is we're going to apply it meaningfully. Here's the thing. Our brain, it wants to take the easy way out. It wants to just sit there and not have to focus on things because it wants you to be as comfortable as possible. So we will actually do things that seem productive, but in actuality, our brains are not having to work as hard. Driving, good example, right? We're going to drive the same path every single time we go to work, to home, to school, whatever it is, because our brain doesn't want to have to think about that. We walk the same routes. We wear the same stuff. We do the same rhythms. In fact, a good little test to see just how much this is applicable. The most frequently used app that you use. Maybe it's TikTok, maybe it's your messaging, maybe it's your pictures, YouTube, whatever it is. Just change the location of that app. Just one area. Maybe it's even a couple of apps up. You will find yourself more frequently going to that same spot on your phone, even though that app doesn't exist. Why? Because your brain wants to go to what's comfortable. Procrastination is another clever way that your brain makes you think that you're actually being productive. In actuality, it's not. It's not being productive. You say, no, man, I need to get this paper done. This desk is a mess. Yeah, I better get this desk cleaned up first. You look like you're productive, but in actuality, you're not actually doing anything. It's kind of like this. Our brain, we say, man, I want to do more push-ups. How do I, do more push-ups? I just do more push-ups. But then we say, well, I'll just do them on my knees. Now, that can be beneficial. You're still getting something out of that, but you're not doing push-ups. You're doing assisted push-ups. Our brain wants to do things that are easy. So we need to get learning habits that are going to help stray away from that we can get the most out of our learning. One of the best examples when it comes to learning that our brain tries to make us think that we're learning something, but it actually isn't, is parroting, right? Parroting. So when we hear information, we're going to write it down, and we're just going to parrot that information back. But in actuality, we don't necessarily know what it means. We might know what it says. So that's why we need to apply things meaningfully, not just see it, but live it. Not just, watch it, but experience it. Let me give you an example from my life. So my wife and I, before we had kids, we would watch MasterChef a lot. And I love cooking, especially cooking for my wife. So whenever I would watch MasterChef, I would say, how can I take one of these recipes or take one of these, techniques or whatever and make something for my wife? One of the first things that I learned from that is Gordon Ramsay's scrambled eggs. Okay. So he's got a whole process to it. It's kind of complicated. If you've never seen it, just YouTube it. He's got a whole video on it. But I would see him make it in the show, right? And I'm like, yeah, that seems like a cool way to make scrambled eggs. But if I had just watched it and thought that and didn't actually do anything about it, we wouldn't have the scrambled eggs. I had to literally do the whole process how he does. Get your butter melting slowly on there. Then crack your eggs. Kind of whisk those lightly so that they're broken up. Then you're going to get your heat and you go 30 seconds on, 30 seconds off, stirring the whole time, right? Then at some point through the process, you're going to add your cream. He uses creme fraiche, but yeah, I don't use creme fraiche. I'm too broke for that. I just use heavy whipping cream. But then you're going to stir as you go. You're going to slow the process till it gets nice and creamy. Then at the end, you're going to add your seasonings at the end because if you add them during the middle, it's going to change the flavor profile of it. Then you're going to add, he always adds chopped chives to the top of it, but I like parsley, so I usually do chopped chives and parsley. Regardless, you have to apply those things. You can't just see it. In our lives, whenever we do see something, we should automatically find ways to be able to apply that to our lives. When we do that, we're going to be learning differently because we're going to make a connection in our brain. Now, one new way that I've discovered kind of this idea of applying things, it's called interleaving. So it's a fascinating idea. So interleaving, the basic idea is rather than studying super hard on one thing, right, just staying focused on A, I'm going to be studying A, B, and C. I'm going to study A, not until I'm a master of it, but until I understand it basically enough that I can move on to B. Then I'm going to go from B back to A, right? But then I might be studying A, B, and C. So I'm going to go A, I get a basic understanding. B, basic understanding. C, basic understanding. But then I'm going to be going back to A, B, and C all together. And here's the beauty. You're making connections between A, B, and C all the time. So it almost gets everything raveled up together. Rather than treating your brain plate like you had in elementary school, where you've got your greens over here segmented, and then there's a section for your milk, and then there's your kind of little treat, and then there's your main protein thing or whatever, and then there's kind of like a starch on the side or a place. You've got these segmented out things. It treats it more like a casserole, where everything kind of gets interwoven. Then you're going to make those synaptic connections. Let me give you an example. I talked about the 3 books that I've been reading about, pre-deciding with Think Ahead, living your best life with those little hacks and habits, and then praying like monks, living like fools, where it's an authentic relationship with Jesus. So whenever I read Think Ahead, the idea of pre-deciding, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to pre-decide when I'm going to pray, right? You see what I did there? I went from A to C. But if I want to be able to do that, then I need to optimize my life. I need to do B. So A influences C, but C has to be influenced by B. Does that make sense? You see how I'm working all those things, and then those habits are going to bleed over into all those things. I'm going to retain a lot of those things a lot more. And you can do this in all kinds of areas of life. Maybe you're studying a hobby. Maybe you're learning coding, right? So rather than just learning one specific kind of coding, right? You're going to learn all areas of coding a little bit, because then they're actually going to communicate about each other. And you're going to say, oh, this HTML, it talked about, this CCE, I think those are actual coding things. I can't remember. Those of you who are coders are like, oh my gosh, this guy doesn't even know. You are totally right. I don't know, but I'm trying my best. So they're actually going to influence each other. And when you say, I have a basic understanding of this, oh, it kind of works like this. But also, here's the cool thing. When you understand how one kind of thing works, it helps you to understand how another thing works, right? In the human body, when you're like, yeah, like I basically understand how the human body works, then you can actually have an understanding and influence of how other different types of anatomy and stuff like that work. But even cooler than that, you can understand, how things like nature works better because you have a basic understanding of the human body. And then nature can influence the way you think about this. When you diversify your learning profile, they influence each other. Things start to make connections. And then you can almost make illustrations, right? Oh, it's kind of like a tree. The bronchial tubes in the lungs, the way that they soak up oxygen and distribute those, it's kind of like the branches of a tree, right? It's exactly like that. Now, I believe that's from a designer, a creator, God, but you still see that bleed over, right? The root system of a tree, it's kind of like the interconnected nature of the internet and how we can make those different connections, things giving and taking there. When you understand how one thing works, it can bleed over into the other. That's interleaving in a nutshell. Okay, it's kind of like task switching that we talked about earlier, but just on a different level. Okay, take a deep breath with me. Ready? Do our box breath. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. That was a lot, right? I'm sorry. I get excited about stuff. But my dear friends, we're going to have to leave. We're going to have to end another time together, wrapping up another month here at the Grow You podcast. Dude, I can't tell you how much I'm thankful for you. Like, I love doing this. I love getting to hang out with you. Thanks for welcoming me into your life, into your ears. It means a lot to me. It means a lot to us that you're taking this and you are applying this in your life. Because here's the thing. When you grow, when you get better, everybody gets better around you. You change the world by changing other people's worlds, but it starts with you changing your world. So thanks for that. Thanks for sharing this as well. I hope that you share this with a friend, a family member, share it on social media, tag us. That would be awesome. We want to get this into the lives of as many people as possible. That's going to help us so that we can help more people like you and your peers and your friends. So please share this, like this, give it to anyone, anywhere. And I just want to say thank you again. Thank you to Rachel, who's doing an amazing job of getting this podcast out as well as the newsletters that I hope you're getting. And please, as always, keep growing, keep getting better. Because when you get 1% better every single day, the person that you were is going to be radically different than the person that you are. And God's going to ever move you closer to the person he wants you to be. So we'll catch you next month. Much love to your success.
Grow You is a next-gen affiliation with Park Chapel Christian Church in Greenfield, Indiana. Grow You podcast is hosted by Kiefer Honeycutt. Music composed by Marble Space. Like and subscribe on YouTube and/or Apple and Spotify podcasts.